again. What happens in the fall and the winter? Okay, you see no leaves, you see no bud, and you see no fruit. What does that mean? And while we're using fruit trees to understand it. So evergreen is different from that. But with this fruit tree, even though you don't see the leaf, you don't see the bud, and you don't see the fruit, is the tree still alive?
Sure.
Okay? But if you were to cut the limb or cut the small little appendages on the tree, if you were to cut those in the fall or the winter, what would you notice about that you would not notice, or you would notice different in the spring or the summer?
It's dry in the winter.
Okay, when you go to cut that, it's already sapped back. So in other words, what is out there seems dry, because when you cut it, there's no sap.
Right.
There's no life.
Right.
The life of the tree is now left and gone back somewhere, but it's not now presently in the limbs or the little appendages that it has there. Because if you were to do the same thing in the summer or the spring, what would happen? When you cut that limb, you would see what?
You would see all that sap.
Okay, you would see the sap oozing. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that many times in our fall and winter, when our leaves have fallen away, when our buds have fallen away, when our fruit has fallen away, it does not mean that we're dead. Okay, what it simply means is now that the sap has left the limbs and the appendages, and now has moved back to the what of the tree?
Roots.
The root. Okay, and because now in the root stores all the leaves, the buds, the fruit. So the strength of the tree is in the root. Okay, just because, and that's what I want us to see here in ministry. Just because we don't presently have leaves on our tree, just because we don't have buds on our tree, just because we don't have fruit on our tree, does not mean that we are not a tree that can bear fruit. It just simply means that we're in the season of our fall or winter where our roots are being strengthened. All right? Many times in ministry, and ministers suffer because they don't understand why they don't have any leaves, don't have any buds, don't have any fruit. But they're not recognizing they're being strengthened in the root. For out of the root comes all of these things. And that's what we need to recognize as we move forward with this study, is that there's a time that you're going to find yourself lacking the capability or the ability to even call on God. You begin to move in the natural. As we move on in these next few verses to finish out the answering the call, we're seeing all these blessed things that are taking place in Abram's ministry and Abram's answering the call. But now we're going to come to a negative side. Say negative.
Negative.
So you need to realize in every circumstance, whether negative or positive, God is still at work.
Amen.
And God is proving something. And here, God's now going to use Abram to teach you and I that we're going to have times just like he did. We will have these times that we'll be acting in the negative rather than the positive. We will be acting upon our nature rather than on our faith. And this is what we're going to be seeing as we move on with this study of Abram. Now, in verse 10, we begin. Read verse 10 for us, please.
Genesis 12:10 out of the Amplified. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down into Egypt to live temporarily, for the famine in the land was oppressive.
Okay. Now, as we saw there, temporarily, he sojourned there for an appointed time, okay? And there was a famine in the land. What can this tell us about our answering the call? There may be a what in our life? A famine. When it seems like what? God doesn't hear us?
Yes.
It just seems like God is not answering us.
Amen.
Okay? Does that mean that God has turned a deaf ear to us?
No.
No. It's a time of growing. And it's a time of trouble, if you will, because we have to really ask ourselves, are we going to continue this walk with God? When we look at this, the next thing that we want to ask is, once again, we see Abram do what?
Move.
What did he do?
He went down.
He went. And where did he go? He went to
Egypt.
Egypt. And what do we know about Egypt? What does it represent to God's people?
Oppression,
Oppression.
Yeah.
captivity,
Captivity. Mm-hmm.
bondage.
Bondage. Okay. All these things going on. That's what Egypt represents to us. It's not to say that Egypt, the place, is bad, but remember, the Hebrew people were oppressed. They were there. And they murmured and complained when Moses was bringing them out. Every time a little natural circumstance came before them, what are we going to eat? And then God provides food. Then they sit there and get all in a tiff and say, well, we're tired of eating this angel food. We don't want this manna anymore. It wasn't good enough. So God sits there and says, okay, now I'm going to give you quail. Well, now you got meat to go along with your bread. And they're still complaining. And then with the issue of water, they get to a place, no water. God brings forth water. Still the complaints come. Again, and it shows us in our lives, you know. And Abram is having one of these situations that's coming before him. He's coming right into a point that he's going to begin to do his complaining. And he's going to begin to show his natural side. Thus far, everything seemed like he's walking by faith. But after verse 10 here, we're going to see a lot of natural things take place. And natural actions come forth. And it serves to instruct us and to show to us the frailties of our existing as God's children. If we don't really depend upon Him, we will find ourselves falling back to our old nature, acting in our natural fleshly conditions. Okay? So I want to take and stop today at this point, because as we get into this is going to get pretty deep into all these natural things, and I don't want to sit there and hit them real quick and get it over with. I want us to leave on a positive note that here, thus far, Abram has moved by faith. But now he's coming to a point of testing. Remember, temptations, tests, and trials. Tests and trials are always brought by God. God is always testing us and proving us. But temptations is not of God. Temptations are of the enemy or are of the devil. Temptations serve to pull you away from what you believe. Tests and trials serve to prove you in what you believe. Amen? With that, we're going to take and close, and we'll come together at our next step.